Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another retro review from past seasons of The Loud House. In today's video, we take a look at that one special episode from Season 4, where if there was ever a way to send off one of the recurring actors of the show, it would be through a story we all have to go through at some point. Today's episode is titled Geriantics. First we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. In this episode, Lisa wants to extend her Pop-Pop's lifespan so as to keep him around long enough to see her accomplishments 70-some years in the future. When she sees he's not sticking to the new life-changing regimen she made for him, she makes a suit that only puts more restrictions on his life, and Albert sits Lisa down to tell her what she's doing is not to the benefit of anyone. The episode ends with Albert ditching the suit and going back to how he intends to spend his final few years, with Lisa finally accepting what life is all about. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. As much as some fans want to complain about Lisa being selfish in this episode, I'm going to be that one guy and say, I get it. I totally get what she wanted to do and what she was feeling. Granted, this is the same kid who's very blunt and straightforward about the facts on reality and science and knowing full well how nature works, but there's still one thing we must remember. Genius or no genius, Lisa is still a little girl, and the idea of a loved one dying is not something you just say, meh, it is what it is, we all die eventually. Even as we get older, we tend not to think about our loved ones dying, and usually try to push the idea out of our heads for as long as we can. However, death is an inevitable part of life, and we have to confront it at one point or another, and that's what Lisa was trying to avoid for as long as possible. Much like the real world, she tried to use science and technology to keep Albert living into what I would assume would be his 140s. A person nearing the age of 150. I'm actually a little frightened on what they would look like. Anyway, while some of Lisa's methods to spruce up Albert's way of life were a little bit out there, like overdoing cardio training, eating healthier but disgusting foods, and fluctuating his body temperature with intense heat and cold water, I confess the suit she ended up making was pushing it. Albert had even less freedom than he did before, like not being able to walk in any sort of sun and moonlight and no longer being able to hug anyone, but can you really say Lisa's heart wasn't in the right place? Her Pop-Pop may have been restricted to being indoors at a charging station for most of the day, but like I said earlier, Lisa didn't want her Pop-Pop to leave despite knowing that's not how fate works. It was at that moment Albert needed to set Lisa straight, so now we come to him. First off, I applaud Fred Willard for making the most of what turned out to be his last voiceover gig as Pop-Pop before he passed away a few months after this episode first aired. From my point of view, the speech Albert gave during the final minute of the episode was a reflection of what would eventually happen to Mr. Willard as it would one day happen to Albert. I don't mean to make it sound like Fred knew he was dying as this episode was being made, but it was a reminder of how everyone has to go sooner or later, and whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. So in the meantime, we have to enjoy what time we still have and make the most of it. And of course, a little change in one's daily activities, if it means adding a few more years to her life, isn't exactly a bad idea either. I give Albert a lot of credit for not only agreeing to go through with Lisa's first life-altering regimen, but also for willingly putting on her touch-sensitive suit just for her sake. It showed he cares about his grandchildren a lot more than himself, and he wasn't about to be selfish and disappoint a genuinely concerned Lisa, at least not to her face. When he thought Lisa wasn't looking, he went back to how he was living before, and I don't blame him. It's hard to change your ways after a certain age, and given how spry he is for an old man, as we've seen in The Old and the Restless for example, there really wasn't much of a reason to change. When he found out he couldn't do much of anything if he was wearing Lisa's suit 24/7, he had to explain how he wasn't living a good life anymore, and how Lisa's pure intentions were not worth a lifetime of boredom and loneliness. It's like Lisa pondered, what's the point of living a little bit longer if you can't enjoy the time you still have? Albert knew he was still healthy enough to live a few more years, and it would be even better knowing he can still dance with Myrtle and hug his grandchildren while he keeps being the happy old man he is. I mean, really, who needs a life-restricting / life-saving suit anyway? Apparently Scoots does. But given what she needs to make it work, she's definitely not going to live forever if she puts it on. I don't know if that's cold to say, but it's the truth. Overall, I can't be extremely critical of this episode because I understood what Lisa was trying to do. A little girl couldn't fathom the idea of her Pop-Pop dying, and she used her above-average intelligence to keep him around for a few more decades, but her good intentions were robbing an old man of the good times he wanted to enjoy before it would become physically impossible to do so. Albert was the best voice of reason for Lisa, and she had to come to terms with how you can't put off something universal like death forever. If anything, this episode is one I think we can all relate to regardless of of age. We don't like talking about death, or even thinking about it, but that time comes for everyone, sooner or later, for better or worse, so the best we can do is enjoy our lives for as long and as happily as we can. Remember, it's the time we spend together now that really matters, not how we leave it. With that said, I give Geriantics a 9.6 out of 10. Well, folks, that concludes my review of Geriantics. All that's left to say is thank you to Fred Willard for bringing life into Pop-Pop Albert. And even though he's no longer with us, he's still in our hearts and minds. And as minor as his role in the Loud House was, he will never be forgotten. Rest in peace, Mr. Willard. You will be dearly missed. So, as far as this episode goes, what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.